Hello, this is Liam from the Game Production Academy, and this is part two of a Q&A session that's been taking place on the Discord server for Game Production Academy. And Glitchbug asked some questions, and in the first piece we were talking about when to use, in this case, Agile Kanban, and some questions around estimates. There's been some follow-up questions since then. So this is a session in which I'm going to go through quite a lot of detail. It might end up being split into various parts. I'm going to cover everything from how to set up your Kanban board to how you would calculate certain priorities, how you would treat for a work for hire, because in this case we're dealing with a team of 10 and a work for hire, how you would deal with multiple projects and prioritization, how you would deal with specialists who are, for example, animators and say QA leads who may have a lot on their shoulders. How do you prioritize them? So we're going to look at all those things. And then probably in the next session, we're going to look at an actual Kanban board that I'll put together with you and show you it all working. So if we carry on, I will just share the Miro board. Happy to make this available for anyone who wants it or to export it. If you put in the comments that you want to see this, I can export it to you as a PDF. If you have a paid Miro license, you can have it as something to import. So it's up to you. So part two. So let's have a look at this. Part two is based on this from Glitchbug. I was torn apart between Kanban and Scrum because on the one hand, our client wants to hit specific milestones in a specific time, which you could say is more like Scrum, but they keep adding on stuff and there's last minute changes. So Kanban would accommodate this more. So I would agree with that. Kanban does definitely handle that better. Now, I always have big doubts on how to approach task design. Right now, we have a well-defined workflow that goes through some stages. Should we create one card for a feature that goes through those stages or a task per stage? So what Glitchbug is saying there is, do we put a card in Kanban that moves the whole way through the workflow and simply passes from one owner to the other? Or would it be better to have one card for each owner and you simply create it at each stage? In other words, you have a card under game design, you have a different card under UI design, you have a different card under animation, and they're linked to each other. So you have successors, predecessors. So we're going to cover that. And there's a lot of information here that I'm going to cover with you. And I'm also going to show you some tables and illustrate things and try and make it as useful as possible. But let's just zone in on a few things. So, yeah, just because you've got milestones doesn't mean that you have to worry about using Scrum. Kanban can handle deadlines, no problem. Kanban has a distinct class of service called fixed date. So that's fine. And you can run simple cadences. There's no problem with cadences in Kanban. People assume you don't have one because Scrum does, but actually cadences are entirely up to you in all forms of project management and program management. It's up to you to set up cadences as part of due diligence at a higher level. But at this level, you can have weekly replenishment. You can have forecast reviews. You can do what you like. You can have daily stand-ups. Entirely up to you. If the client keeps adding work late, the only sustainable control is transparent trade-offs. Now, this is very important. It's very common for a commercial client to say, we want more. Can you do it quicker? And for the person who is keen to take their money, say, yes, of course. Now, however, that is not sustainable. You'll kill the team and you won't deliver. People will start crunching, etc. So at some point, you have to push back. And you have to say, well, yeah, sure, but what are we going to drop or delay? Now, what I'm going to arm you with is a mathematical way of not maybe dropping, delaying, but at least prioritizing the lists so that you can say, we know what the top priority projects are that are coming in. Let's have a look at calculating using fixed ways of doing it, which are the most important projects and the most important deadlines and milestones that are coming up. And then in the face of that, let's look at tasks and let's look at what everyone's doing and let's look at how we prioritize that. So we might not be able to say, This will definitely enable you to force the issue of dropping or delaying. What it will do is give you all the ammunition to show mathematically and visually, hey, here's what we're going to be doing in this amount of time. And unless you give us more people, then that's not going to change. So that's really powerful. Multiple projects at once problem. So I said before in the part one of this that multitasking is going to be a bit of a killer with through context switching, and that you should add a percentage to any estimate you make, 150%, right? So if someone says 8 hours, make it 12, because context switching is really hard. And the more you do it, the more you're unfortunately going to be in trouble. However, that's daily life for a lot of people. It just has to be done. So, and you can learn over time to get better at it. And of course, as a producer, a project manager, you can measure over time using Kanban what's actually happening, and you can tighten your estimates if you need to, like that, using actual data rather than just guesswork. So there are some practical policies. Now, previously, when I was first talking generically about this, I said, well, often you'd put a WIP limit of 2 in for a person so that you can have one item in progress. And if you're waiting for another one, if you're waiting for one, then you can be working one while you're waiting. Now, actually, there's a way of doing it. If you have a column which is waiting and review, you could have a WIP limit of 1 in the in progress, so that there's only one that you're working on. And this would be useful in this context because if we add that column, then we can measure how long things wait or are in review. And we want that data. So we'll do it that way. And per project WIP cap. So we can work out through how many people are on a project what the WIP cap is going to be, and we can enforce it. So normally, everyone's screaming and saying everything's urgent. So what we do is we use these classes of service in Kanban. So expedite, fixed date, standard, intangibles. And I covered those previously, but I'm just reminding you. This is a bit of a reminder so far. Now, let's have a look at the next piece. Do we do a card moving across stages or one card per stage? Well, for small studios facing this situation, I would definitely say one card per customer facing thin slice. So that might be a feature. It might be a single deliverable, such as an art asset, a piece of animation, and it moves from left to right across disciplines. Why would you do that? Well, it keeps the flow visible. You can see where that single ticket is all the time. You're not going to get confused by multiple tickets about the same thing. And that reduces the admin, right? So you don't have to look at all these dependencies going on the board, but you can go, right, no, there's one ticket and it's moving across. Also, you can measure the waiting state. So when something's ready to go in Kanban, so it's in the ready column. So let's say it's been animated and then it's moved from working on animation to ready to go to the next stage, and it's not been pulled, you can measure how long it's there for. And that allows you to improve things through the Kanban method. When you assess it, you go, right, what can we do to improve this? And you can see that visibly when the work's piling up, but it's not, say, being, I don't know, QA'd or whatever. You can use child cards or checklists, but in Kanban, it's quite often you can do subtasks, or you can put a child card on in a lot of the Kanban systems these days. If the slice is too big, we don't want anything more than about 3 days of effort because that's just too big. We want to be able to deal with quite small effort tasks because it's much easier to deal with that as an item that needs to flow across. If it's more than 3 days, it's probably worth breaking it down. So could be that, or maybe because work genuinely is running in parallel. And of course, it might be, right? You might say, example here of UI and code and audio concurrently, whatever that is, you might need some child cards to handle that. So normally though, hopefully not. One card per stage, it's only really a thing if it's like it says here, if it's substantial and independently planned or outsourced, or you've got tooling reporting needs that require stage level tracking. So it's going to be unusual. There might be a special request that comes in from a client, and you just go, you know what, in this case, you're going to know that when it comes in. And the way you'll know it is by making sure that you don't normally do it. So when it does come in, you go, do you know what? That's best handled that way. You can do that. So your parents and your child cards underneath, though, when if that does happen. Those are kind of like your catch ups and sets the stage. Because what I want to do next is actually go through it and say, well, okay, so let's look at what this actually is going to look like then. Because it sounds great, but how do you do it? How do you actually set up the Kanban board? What are the operating rules? Because Kanban, of course, needs those rules or it just doesn't work. You need to know how to move across, how to flow. You need to know how to prioritize, or otherwise, you're just dealing with something like using a Jira board and just moving things across. You're not doing anything that's Kanban. So you need to know how to do this. And we know we're going to be in a situation with multiple projects and shared specialists. So, what's our goal? It's to make work and capacity visible, isn't it? And to stop uncontrolled multitasking. That's where the clear rules come in. So, which project wins the scarce specialist time? You've got one animator, what are they supposed to be doing? You've got one QA person who's outsourcing, or what are they supposed to be doing? What to pull next inside a project where work is repetitive? So, this is really important, right? I When I did part one, I was kind of thinking about weighted shortest job first. I was thinking about quite sort of complex prioritization. And I realized as I was planning this one and I was working through it, I was thinking, hang on a second, a lot of the work here, it's just going to be the same score because you might have been given 30 pieces of art to produce and they're all pretty much the same. Or you might have been given the assets that are waiting to be animated and basically they're all about the same size and they just all need to get done. So there are certain rules that I've had to change and tweak to take that into account. So that's, I hope, of interest to you when we go through this. So we're going to start with Kanban. We've said that we want to do that, and I've got some summaries here more for, if you download it and you need a reminder or you need to sort of talk to other people about these things. But I mean, Scrum, it's a dedicated team usually, and you don't you don't have stable sprint scopes. You've basically got lots of work coming in, potential bottlenecks that you need to try and optimize and get rid of if you can. You've got whip limits in place to try and reduce context switching and also just to help with the flow. And it's not a stable thing. You're dealing with the kind of chaos and complexity that Kanban loves. So, what's your board going to look like? Next time, I will make this board and we'll go through it and we'll refer back to all of these things. But I want you to understand why the board's going to look the way it's going to look first. So, what's the minimum viable board for a single system of work? And I make that, by the way, very explicit because it's tempting to make multiple boards, but I want one board. Okay. One board, because then it's just less confusing and you can visualize everything on a single board. You really can because you'll use swimming lanes. So you're going to have your different projects will have different swim lanes, which means you can see what everyone's doing across different projects. You can see where people have put most of their efforts in. And if your projects are the highest priority, but no one's working on it, they're all working on some pet project somewhere else, you can see it straight away. You can have optional lanes. So you can have a business as usual internal tech debt lane. It's useful actually, particularly if the risk of not doing it is that the stuff becomes invisible and people's capacity suddenly becomes questionable because you didn't know they were working on things and they had to work on, for example, business as usual. If you put it in as a lane, you'll be able to see it and measure it. And then I say optional, but it's never really optional. Lane 0, in other words, at the top, expedite. Now, we'll come back to what the expedite is, but you kind of probably already know. Expedite is the scary lane where you have to stop everything else and do that one thing. And it can become a complete waste of time because if you're not prioritizing properly and you're not controlling and ordering work, everything becomes a panic and ends up. You should have only one thing in expedite at any one time and just focus on it and get it done. You shouldn't really have anything in expedite most of the time. It should really only be called upon as a last resort. But it will happen. You're going to get panic stuff come in where you just didn't realize something or that you suddenly, some piece of work fell through the cracks and it has to be done by tomorrow. Okay, fine. That's life. It's never going to be perfect. It's fine. Columns with explicit handoff visibility. So we will use things like this, right? So backlog. Now, the backlog is a bunch of nice to have work, well, hopefully must have work, but a bunch of work nonetheless that you probably haven't put a lot of thought into. The ready committed stage is when you've taken it to ready and you've actually put enough work in to understand what is required. And we'll come back to that because I will show you what that means in terms of prioritization, because it's that process of making it ready that will allow you to prioritize it, because you'll be scoring it against certain factors. Animation, art, integration dev, QA review, it depends on your workflow. Yours might go on for 18 steps. It doesn't matter. Depends on the work you do. It depends how things normally go. It could be that most of your work is art and animation work. It could be that within art production, there can be a lot of phases that you need to flow through in order to get your art assets to a position where they can be signed off. It can be extremely complicated, and God bless you if you're an art producer or an art manager. There's a lot of complexity there. What's important here, though, is that there are two columns. Within animation, for example, any of these that are in progress work, you don't just have a column that says there's a card inside animation. You say there's a card that's work in progress. Within that particular column, when the work has been done to the extent, maybe the quality bar, or maybe to whatever it is that makes you say, yep, that can be reviewed now or handed off, it moves to that column within, say, animation. So the animator's finished as far as they're concerned, they chuck it into that column, and that means it can be pulled, because you pull things that are ready for handoff or review, right? You can pull it into the next piece. And maybe it's being pulled into review. Maybe that's the next thing that we've got there. And maybe that's really important. It has to go to review. Maybe there's a rule in place that says, in order to move to review, I, the animator, need to have a quick check with some lead somewhere that says, yep, that's ready for the client to review it. And then you can move it to the review point. And then that's an external review. And then it's been sent off. You're waiting for feedback. And that will be a column as well, right? Because there will be work to do within that piece when you get the feedback. And you don't want to move a card to the left. You don't want to move it backwards. So these feedback loops that come in, you make them explicit, right? So we'll have a little rework card, possibly, is one way of doing it. You can have a little card that comes up and says, here's this rework we're doing. So we're just going to measure how much work that is. Or you can have a rework lane. So we can just put in rework and say, right, it's in rework. And that could just be the column that comes after review, for example. You could do it that way. So there are multiple ways of doing it. But what you don't want to do is move the card back and forth. As soon as that happens, you've lost the ability to measure things. So don't do it. Just leave it in rework. Just goes, it's back with the animator, it's in rework. Okay. You can look at the age of cards. You can find out where the blockers are. It could be really interesting to be looking at these things. And remember, rework is part of in progress. So it's part of the WIP limits of how many cards you're allowed to work on at once. So if somebody is constantly having to rework something with a problem client, guess what? All the rest of your work starts to back up. And guess what? If you've visualized everything, you can see that. When you have your cadenced daily stand-ups, or you have your weekly sessions where you look through these things, it becomes very obvious. So it's great. I love it, by the way. I'm very excited to tell you about this stuff. And I hope you find it interesting, because I absolutely love this stuff. I've been using Kanban for years and it's really powerful. So, WIP limits. When you set your board up, put a WIP limit in, one per person. So we've already talked about this, right? But it's one per person across all projects. That's important. Don't make it one per person per project. So they can do one thing at once. Now, as soon as something's moved, you can work on the next thing. And we will show you how to measure what that is. You can have different caps in different columns. It's up to you. But as long as there is a discipline, there are some rules. You can apply changes to those WIP limits over time as you need to. You can learn, etc. But try and keep it as little as possible on WIP caps. So it matters because it forces you to finish work, right? It forces you to move things to the right as quickly as possible. Reduces thrash, like going back and forth. And the bottlenecks are undeniable because they're data. They're just maths. You can go, oh, look, over time, this column here always has the longest amount of cards in it, or cards are in it for the longest amount of time. You can measure those things and show them, and then you can talk about them, and then you can improve things. If you don't measure them, guess what? It's just somebody telling you something that may or may not be true. It's just something they think or they feel. Get the data. Classes of service. We talked through these. You don't need many of them. Here's some, right? And they'll help you with milestones and they'll help you with prioritization. Because guess what? The top one is expedite, a proper emergency. And you can't just have anyone coming up with an expedite. It needs to be agreed. You need rules in place. You need to agree what does an expedite really mean, right? Because it's going to break the flow of everything else. Fixed date is the next one, which is the next top priority, which is when do you need it by? Well, we have a submission gate, we have a review gate, we have milestones. Okay. And let's face it, most of the work for hire stuff probably is going to have fixed date. Standard is normal project work because, believe it or not, in a normal world, you don't have fixed dates. I know that's hard to believe if you're work for hire, but there are actually studios out there making games that don't have fixed date or expedite. They just deal with standard and intangible. So those are those nice to haves. And those are the things where what I was saying about having swimming lanes that might capture some of these things where it might not be about tech debt or improvements or nice to haves. It might be about like your monthly optimization, backups, whatever you need to do, right? And just capturing that work. So what is the core problem about? It's about one specialist across 3 projects. Quote bug from previously. Now, we need to determine, how do you prioritize work for individuals? Now, I had talked before about latest shortest job first and cost of delay. Don't worry, you don't need to know what they are if you don't. But I briefly mentioned them because they are the common way within Kanban and within lean product management of prioritization, because you're using maths to say, hey, here's what this stuff is, why it's important. Why is this thing important? Well, because of this and this. Let's turn that into some numbers. Let's divide some numbers and come up with a ratio. And then we can go, hey, look, that number's bigger than that number, so it's more important, or whatever it is, right? Smaller. But that requires differentiation between work. And often in a work for hire situation, you don't really have that. You have batches of work to do and things like that. And it becomes really very obvious that that's not going to work for you. You can't do something that complex at the item level. And we'll talk some more about that because it does work at the project level. So we'll come back to this. However, critical ratio does work. So critical ratio is pretty cool because what it does is it says, okay, when you've got a scarce specialist, like an animator, across multiple projects, you can prioritize at the project gate level, not by scoring every asset card. So what this means is you can look at, first step, you can look at defining the next meaningful gate per project. You can go, okay, so this isn't the final end date, by the way. This is saying, what's the next gate? So for a project B, we've got a really important client review build coming up in 12 days. All the other projects, we got much more time than that, but we've got a gate. Okay, great. That's step A. We know that there's a meaningful gate, so we've got 12 days. What's the remaining work, do we think? So for animator days, remaining until the next gate. Okay, so we've kind of estimated what's left to do. And this is for the constrained role. And I don't want to lose you all here. I want to make this very clear. You only have to do this where you have specialists that are scarce. So these can be people like you've got one animator or you have one QA person. And whatever it is, right? It's that person who can be the single point of failure, who can be the blocker for lots of other things. Work can pile up if that role doesn't get themselves properly flowing. Okay. And it's pretty obvious who they are normally. It is people usually like animators and QA who don't normally have enough people working in their team, but it's usually just them, especially with a small team. But anyway, let's assume it's the animator. So we've looked at how many days we've got until the next gate. We've looked at the remaining days of work. And hey, we just do the time remaining divided by the work remaining. And you know what? If it's less than 1, you're already late, aren't you? I mean, if you've got 12 days left, you've got 24 days of work remaining, it's going to be 0.5, isn't it? So it's below 1, so that means you're late. If it's between about 1 and 1.3, you're just about getting there, but there's a high risk, right? Because you're assuming that your estimates are right. So that's the case where the project should win the specialist. So you go, you know what, in this case, there's that many days left. They have this much days to work. They can just about do it, but we've just got to focus them on that thing there, on that project. When I say that project, remember, it's not the whole project. It's the next project gate, which could be a client review build, a milestone submission, or an acceptance check, or whatever. So if it's over 1.5, great. We got plenty of time. Maybe something else is going to be more important, another project with another deadline. So you work on the one with the lowest CR, critical ratio, the one which has got the least slack, right? There's the least you can do about it. It's the one where you're going to have to grind the hardest. Unless there's an explicit expedite or fixed date inside the risk window that you have to attend to instead. So we can look at this and we can, I've given you some examples here of timing that are often used in weighted shortest job first that could be used here. If you do have to use weighted shortest job, in this case though, very simple, just days. Right? How long have you got? How long have you got remaining? Boom. So ignore that box to the left because it's for other things. I have got some arrows going off here because guess what? It becomes quite interesting, right? So critical for me. I'm so sorry. I do find this very exciting to talk about, and I think I might be the only person in the world who feels that way. But hey, there you go. You're here. I've captured your attention. You can always rage quit. So critical ratio, right, doesn't come from Kanban. It's operational scheduling and dispatching in manufacturing. So there you go. That's where it comes from. Pretty simple, but it has to be simple, right? Because it's only going to be applied to a couple of your specialists. And it looks at these constrained resources, which is a classic in inventory management and manufacturing and scheduling and all these sort of things. Just look at the Toyota production, look at so many things. Anyway, it's simple and it's repeatable. Okay. And it says, okay, that wins. Now, I don't want to necessarily lose you at this point, but as an aside, weighted shortest job first, which is very, very, very popular, okay, in Kanban for prioritization, can still be used at your replenishment portfolio scheduling. So at the batch or milestone level, it can be used at the batch, let's call it the batch level, right? You can use it at this top level. So when you do your milestone scheduling, you say, okay, which projects, milestone batches should we commit capacity to next? That's the question. And what you do is you use weighted shortest job first. And that is your cost of delay divided by the size. And I showed you that little size panel. And so if you get yourself a copy of this, you can use that as an example, right? At the deliverable batch level. So if you got 50 cards and it's just basically the same bunch of 50 things, like you've been asked to create 50 animated teddy bears, and really, you can't really differentiate between them by using the normal WSJF criteria, which I'll show you in a second. But you can differentiate between the project's batches in that you can look at the cost of being late. And the cost of delay is basically what's the cost of being late. Don't scream at me if you realize that's not entirely true, but I'm trying to keep this simple, right? Because it won't be the same for all clients and all gates. So we focus on project X next gate package. We score the cost of delay for delaying that gate, and then we estimate the size as the effort to reach that gate. In other words, how many days is it going to take or whatever, more t-shirt sizes. And then we rank it and we say which one wins. So differentiators, right? One client has a history of churn or escalation, another's tolerant. That will affect it. One gate's a demo, one other's internal. One is technically risky and needs early proof. These will all affect your decisions, right? So you might say, well, project B, milestone gate in 2 weeks, high cost of delay, moderate size. Project A is client review build, high strategic relationship, cost of delay. Project C is low consequence, flexible. So we're going to work on B first, right? It's not telling an animator do a certain task. It's telling the studio at the top level that project B should get the first call on the shared specialist time this week. Project B is the most important. So if there's work in project B for those specialists, chuck them at that. Okay. And then when we look at dispatching work to individuals, we will come back to that, because what I would like to do is just flick over to this piece. So this part of the, let's call it lesson, is cost of delay. So the cost of delay says, what gets worse if we don't do this now? Okay. And it avoids the problem of saying everything's urgent. So we split it into 3 easy questions, and I'll show you this in a table. What is the economical contract impact? And by the way, I have deliberately made this applicable to work for hire studios. So cost of delay, economic contract impact. If it slips, what the commercial impact could be: milestone payments, penalties, client walking away, right? So higher score if there's money acceptance or contract terms affected. What about time criticality? So it needs to be ready for a client review call, must hit a submission date, has to land before another team's scheduled integration test window, right? So the higher score, if missing the timing, makes the work much harder or triggers knock-on delays. And then enablement, risk reduction. Does doing this now unlock other work or prevent rework later? So that could be a sample animation that confirms the style and pipeline before you produce 20 more. Massively important, right? A pipeline rig fix that unblocks lots of assets. Anything that prevents finding a major problem. So if it unblocks multiple people or avoids doing lots of work the wrong way, boom, high score. And this is how we could score these things. And remember, we're dealing with things at a high level here. We're not dealing with individual items of work. Okay, so you only have to do this weekly or every 2 weeks, right? When things come in. So basically, 1 is negligible, 10 is like the most extreme. Okay, and their relative scores, don't overthink it. But basically, for the next gate package, in other words, you might have already been working on project B for 6 weeks, and it could be that the next gate is in 2 weeks' time, and it's, say, I don't know, final approval of top quality assets or something. Okay, so you've got 2 weeks to go. In other words, 10 working days. Okay, not the whole project, it's the next package of work. Okay, so it could be that every month you get paid, you've got monthly milestones, so it's very simple for you. Every 22 working days or so, you've got some shizzle to deliver, right? So suggested anchors. So here we go. So the economic contract impact you saw first, 10 directly risks, 1 doesn't really. Time criticality, 10, hard day, it's inside the risk window. So you can set a risk window yourself. You can say 10 working days. It depends how long you've got, right? You might say, well, there's only 10 days to go, but we're in the last 5 days. We're inside the risk window. It's a 10. Okay, so just you can use that to force the issue. So if you're looking at it every week, you can go, right, we've reached that final week. Everything now has to focus on this thing. Hopefully you've done some preparation before it becomes that important. Enablement and risk reductions. Can we unblock multiple people's streams or prevent large-scale rework? If it's the first of kind validation, that's really important, and getting pipelines and rigs fixed and things like that. If that's too much for you, use 1 to 5 scale. I've gone ahead and used a 1 to 10 scale, so I wanted to give you some examples. So let's assume today, the day I'm doing this is 20th of January, and your studio's got a 10 working day risk window for fixed date gates. So let's say that. And let's look at an example table. So in this example, we have projects, statuses, and you can see that we've got 3 projects on the go, and then we got 6 more that are upcoming. So good for us. What about the work? So the next gate, client review build for project B, content drop, an internal integration date, a kickoff first playable, an asset pack, a vertical slice review, right? So gate date. So we got the 6th of February coming up. Well, that's a fixed date. And we have a 10th of February fixed date for A. C is a standard. The rest of them are standard. We've even got an intangible down there for an audio UI pass. So if we start going across here, we have these economic contract impact, time criticality, enablement, risk reduction. So we've gone through, and as these things have come in, or as it's the next gate, we've chatted to the people that we need to chat to, and we've gone, okay, let's rate it. Do you know what? In this case, project B, It's an 8. Time criticality, it's got to be a 10 because we're within the window, has to be. And it's got a 7 there. So it's come up to a 25. A's close on a 22. Then we got a 19, a 16, etc. Right? But what matters is that if we look at the projects which are actually going here, and we look at the size, right? So we've given them large, medium t-shirt size with numbers attached. So 25 divided by 4 is 6.25. 22, it's only a medium. So you divide it by 2, you get 11. Okay, and that 9.5 and so on. So when you start to divide them, that's when this COD divided by size. So this is your weighted shortest job first. Okay. So in this case, B wins because you've only got 7 days to the gate. You've got 9 days on this one. Animator days as well. So I've thrown that in because I want to cover animators separately and as a specialist, right? But in this case, time to work is 0.88 there and 1.5 there. That's for the animator. So weekly priority for all of us, though, is up here, 1 and 2, and that's based on this weighted shortest job first. Okay. So we know that project B is at the top. Means that we can make decisions that say, everybody who's got project B work, get on with it. And then if you've run out of B work, you go to A next. Run out of A, go to C, etc. Okay. So let's go back to level 2, dispatching work to individuals. Critical ratios. All right. So you can use it for everybody, but I would say don't. Just use it for the specialists that are getting blocked a lot and really need to make sure that their priorities are validated and visualized and properly understood. Use critical ratio. Just say, okay, we know which project lane wins. We've just worked that out, right? It's something that we'll come back to the animation person in detail, but you can look at it and you can say, okay, critical ratio decides which project lane wins the constraint specialist today. Okay. And we've looked at this within that project's ready queue. You sequence by early feedback first, unblock downstream, FIFO aging, and minimize changeover. So I realized if you've been just listening to this, by now you're probably like, poor. But just have a look, have a breathe, pause, come back. Because level 2, dispatching work to individuals, is really interesting and relatively simple, right? Because not everybody needs the critical ratio. So in a normal life, normal people working on things who aren't these constraint specialists, you can still use this stuff here to work out what to do first. So early feedback first. So as we've said, if you need a representative asset or slice so you don't do it wrong 10 more times, that's really important to do first. So get your early feedback done. Next task you'll be looking at is to unblock downstream. Downstream in Kanban means over there. So to the right, okay? So that where other people are waiting for you. So prioritize whatever unblocks the next stage, particularly if you're looking at things like integration and QA and things like that and client review, right? Got to try and unblock it because it keeps the work flowing. So don't let assets pile up waiting for someone to pick them up. You got to keep pulling them. So then FIFO aging. So first in, first out, right? So within the chosen project lane, pull the first in, first out from the ready queue. If it's been waiting in ready longer than our aging threshold, let's call it 5 working days now at this level, it jumps to the top to prevent hidden delays. Minimize changeover. So we've talked about context switching and things like that, right? But pull the next item that shares the same setup context. So if you've been dealing with the same character rig style, pat level, whatever, right? It just reduces overhead and it increases throughput. All right. So at the top of your board, you could put this little thing that says expedite followed by fixed date and risk window is the lane priority. And within the lane, feedback first, on blockers, FIFO aging, just to kind of summarize, or do whatever you like, right? And you can use tags, ranking. And when I set the Kanban board up, we'll go through all of this properly. But you could say, add a tag like feedback first. You could put it onto a card, or it's an unblocker. It's a rework, right? Things like that as well. So if we look at this example, we've got here the animator. We met in the first of these chats. Aisha Patel, animator. Focus on B, right? And we know that. We know that B needs to be the most important for the people who've got work assigned to B. So there's a lot of people on B at the moment. And we say, all right, enemy A locomotion set version 1. We got 6th of February project gate date. And you remember that from above, the 6th of February, right? Days to the gate. So there's only 7 days to go. There's 9 for project A, but 7 project B. Holy hell. Guess what? We've got a remaining roll days. We're 8 days left. Remaining roll days to gate of 8, 6, and 5. So then we do our divisions and we say there's a 0.88 there. So we're in a bit of trouble. 7 divided by 8, by the way, 0.88. And days to gate 7, 7, 7, right? That's not going to change, but it's the amount of work that's left to do. So the next person down's got 6 and 5. The smaller that number, remember, if it's under 1, the less possible you can actually do it. Now, that's a B wins because they're a shared specialist. They're an animator. So basically everything has to go onto B for them to be able to catch up there. The next one is QA lead. So QA lead, focus on B, review candidate regression triage. It's the same, right? 7, but you've got 6 days of work. So 7, 6 is 1.17. So you can just about do it. So you have to get on with it, right? QA leadership's gating, acceptance triage. You've got to get on with it. And technical artists next. The reason it's these 3 is because the first 2 are fairly obvious. I think that they can be specialists who are quite rare, and they can also produce the most blockage for moving on if they're not being dealt with properly, if the flow's not there. The technical artist often has been given work which will block you until it's done. So in here, there's a problem with the rig export pipeline. Well, if they don't do that, some other people are going to be held up. So I've put in a CR for them as well and said pipeline fixes unblock multiple assets. Great. So there you go. There's those 3. But note, nobody else, for everybody else, it's quite simple for them. They know what they're supposed to be doing and they're just getting on with it. Okay. So they're not a cross project constraint. Now I will come back to examples where I show where they are prioritizing work and how you can do that. But for them, they're getting on with it. They're pulling items that have already been assigned for them using these kind of basic rules, right? These basic rules that say early feedback first, unblock downstream, first in, first out aging, minimise changeover. Okay, so it's not all about the maths. There's some really simple rules here that will help you with flowing. You can say weekly replenishment agenda. So producer release can get together and say, okay, what's the project's next gates? Has anything changed? Have we got new gates coming in for review, submission acceptance? Okay, how many days have we got there? And treat the work needed for that gate as a batch, right? So we've just shown you that. Score each batch with a simple COD, shown you that. Estimate the size, compute it. There you go. That will then give you your project batch priority order. Okay. And then you can have this sort of capacity intent if you need it to say, well, okay, we better focus that much on these things, or you can simply visualize how much focus there is. You're going to be able to see it and you can move it around. Daily, though, you can do a team pull with a daily stand-up. And I've run these frequently. They're very useful because what you do is you say, right, okay, we start from the right-hand side, but actually anything that needs to be expedited first, and if there is, everything else stops, and you just finish that expedite. Otherwise, next one down, fixed date. Okay, can we pull any fixed dates? Anything that's ready to go, you pull it from the fixed date first, because that's how Kanban priority works. The next one down after fixed date is constrained roles. Can you pull from the highest priority project? Okay. Yep, highest priority project is B. Can I pull something? Right, B. So inside the chosen project next, sequence for flow is feedback, unblock, FIFO, aging, changeover. So we've done the prioritization there, right? In our case, it was B, then A, then C. If it comes to the point where somebody's saying, where should I pull my next ticket from? You can say, well, tell you which the highest priority project is. Okay, yes, I have got actually 3 things in B. How do I decide which one to do next? We'll use the sequence for flow. Feedback, unblock, FIFO, aging, changeover. And actually, producer's probably already done that for you by visually making sure that the cards are at the top in the right order. So that's quite powerful, right? You've got a way of measuring these things. I understand if you haven't done it and you're just listening to me go on and waffle about this stuff, then it can be a quite overwhelming experience. However, get your hands on these things, these assets here that I've got produced for you, get your hands on these panels of information, have a go yourself, you'll find that it's not too bad, actually. We were just talking about critical ratios, right? So let's look at step 6 here. And a lot of this we've already talked about, so I'm going to go through it briefly. I'll have it down here as a summary so that you don't have to remember it all. Instead, this is called flow heuristics, right, within Kanban. Flow heuristics. So, okay, great. What's the flow? Maximize your early feedback, unblock your downstream, FIFO with aging, minimize changeover. We've just said that. This is just a nice summary of it, okay? But that's how you look at it. And bear in mind, just because we're dealing with flow heuristics, we're dealing with rules. You don't need a project manager or producer at a junior level wandering about saying, what are you going to do next? Or what about this? Right? You, as a person working on the tasks, know by following these rules what to pull next. As long as you're taught what that rule is, you don't have to waste half a day waiting, or you don't have to be, oh my god, the producer's gone on holiday this week. No one will know what work to do. But yes, they will. This is the work you do, and this is how you calculate it if you need to calculate it. And you're empowering the team, right? They can be absolutely comfortable that following these rules will maximize the flow of tickets. Therefore, they don't have to be frightened. They don't have to be confused. They don't have to be blocked. Great. There you go. These are the rules. And unless the owner, the producer, the leads at the top who are pulling in new projects, unless they change the order of project priority, it's all here. Right? It's all very simple. You're just cracking on. So, replenishment versus daily work. Okay, so maybe weekly or twice a week replenishment happens. Producer and leads decide, okay, what enters ready, committed in each project lane. So remember, we got backlogs. So you might have 15 animations in the backlogs, right? In order for them to become ready, you need to put a bit of effort into each card. You need to say, well, what class of service? And project priority driven by critical ratio for constrained roles. So maybe just for animator, QA, and the technical artist, for example, right? Otherwise, you don't have to do it at all. They just use the pull rules. You might, of course, need to put information into the ticket to explain what the job is, but we're focusing on the moment at replenishment prioritization. So the pull rule, what a person should pick next, the whip has to allow it. So expedite, boom, fixed date items inside the risk window. Otherwise, pull from your highest priority project lane, pull the next ready for your discipline item, and use the project sequencing. Optional but highly effective. So we're coming really into optional extras here, because now we're about to talk about, do we need separate, let's call them constraint queues for people like animators? I'm assuming the animator in this team, I'm picking on the animator saying, I have no idea, by the way, what Glitchbug's team comprises, but I'm just making this up for demo purposes. So we're going to pick on one animator serving multiple projects. So I'm going to say, is it worth the animator having their own queue? Maybe they should have, because then they're completely then zoned in on the work they need to do. They're not distracted by having this big Kanban board of everything, having to look at everything and making their minds up. They can actually have it all done for them, right? They could have a smaller queue. They could have a queue which is just ready for review done. And it could be the producer ordering it, saying, well, I've used critical ratio. Here you go, just pull from top to bottom. And then there's no interruption at all there. You go, okay, well, what would that look like then? Well, indeed, what would it look like? So let's look at the dedicated animator queue. So don't make a second official board, right? Don't duplicate anything, because that'd be really annoying. It's just a filter. Make it a filtered view. And what you do is you say, we'll tag cards with animation, right? And we'll have these states, and producer will weekly set lane priority critical ratio, and we'll just move cards around from top to bottom. Everybody else looks at the project swim lane board, right? This is just a personal queue, which is their own personal filter. So it hasn't changed anything for anybody right? You're not having to do something super special. And when I do the Kanban board again, I'll show you what this could look like. So we've used that 9 project table that was way over on that other side. A filtered view of the main board, a ready for animation, ordered by the agreed pull policy, and the whips one. You can only work on one thing at once. Expedite, fixed date inside the risk window, which is 10 days. Otherwise, choose a project with the lowest critical ratio. Within this chosen project, there we go. I'm just repeating that to show you that's just what people need to think when they're looking at this. So if you look at the table, here we go. Project B first, right? And then A and then C. We know that because we saw that it had been worked out using weighted shortest job first on the other table at the top level. So the animator's already been told, do everything for B first. Now, B has a gate of the 6th, right? So there's the 6th, and then we move on to the 10th, and then the 19th. So those are fixed date, followed by some 2 standards at the bottom, right? So we've got a bunch of work here ready for animation. So it's ready for animation. There's enough detail in there. We know what that has to be. Okay, great. There's some enemy work to do. Then there's some mascot work here and whatever. Why is it here? Well, this one, fixed date in the risk window and the CR worst. So it's the worst when it was calculated, right? Same project priority, same project priority. This one minimizes changeover. This one unblocks QA pass. Okay, great. We're following that list of what should come in what order, right? And you look also at age days in ready and you look at unblocking there. You can say, okay, that unblocks. Okay, great. And then as you move along, you go, great. Here we go. Set up group. Bam. And in the notes, you can go, well, actually, that one gives the feedback first. And that is the same rig context. Okay. So, and actually that's aging and it is over threshold. And if you were to enforce it strictly, you could leap that to the top. But actually, you've decided, actually, you know what? The producers decided, oh, we'll get that feedback first. Okay, let's just get that done first. And then we can do this other thing. B and A dominate the queue, right? They're fixed date inside the risk window. CI is what justified giving B the first call on the animator. Slack. Inside B, ordering uses the within lane rules. Right. Okay, done. Right, done. Nothing else to really think about there. So we're talking about the animator having their own filtered queue, which is just a view. And we're also saying, well, the cadence, right? So a daily stand-up, 10 minutes, flow huddle. It's not status reporting, right? It's not a stand-up like you do with Scrum, where you just stand up for 10 minutes and go, oh, I've been doing this, and it was really annoying, and I thought I had a day left, but now I've got 3. I don't care, shut up. This is a flow huddle. So what you say is, what can we move, right? Giving you the agenda above. But basically, what can we move from right? On the right hand, you start on the right, and you say, what can I pull, right? Because your job is to finish work. So what can I pull from the right first? And then you move towards the left, and you see what else you can keep pulling off to the right. Blockers. Is there a blocker that you need help with? Great, this is your chance to talk about it. Is it aging work? Has the producer or whoever it is that's helping here looked at your cards and gone, oh, look, we've got some here that are aging. Most Kanban board software solutions, they have visual aging possible, where you can see on each card how long a card's been there. And then WIT breaches, right? And you might say, well, in this case, there's a breach and we're going to allow it, or we're going to make some rule changes, but usually you would say, nope, not allowed. Replenishment. So once or twice a week, 20, 30 minutes, right? It's just have a look. So what can you do? Can you make anything better for anybody there? Confirm fixed date items. What can you do? Monthly, sanity check. Have a look at what's going on. Are the commitments realistic? Can you improve anything? It's Kanban. What one change can you make that's going to make things better? You can talk to the team as you go and just have a monthly check. How's it all looking? Have a look at the data in the background. This is your chance to look at the reporting and go, oh my God, look, everything's blocked in that area. I need to help there. You don't need to leave it to be monthly, but it's at least if it's booked in, it forces you to have a look and prepare, right? If things are busy. If your critical ratio says that multiple projects are around 1, which means no slack, then you've overcommitted as a studio, right? You need scope cuts, you need more capacity, or you need to renegotiate gates. Now, if the boss isn't prepared to renegotiate gates, that only leaves 2 things. And you're not saying that emotionally, you're using data. you can say, let's sit down together and you help me to understand we can change here. And then they'll sit down with you. And if you've done your job right, they'll say, I see what you mean. We are overcommitted, aren't we? Well, unfortunately, I have overpromised. I can see where we could maybe work with one of the clients or one of the projects to give us some more time. And maybe you can tell QA that they are allowed that extra person to help with capacity. Or maybe you can go back and find out if it's really correct, that estimate there, right? But it gives you data. So it's not there to make the boss's life easier by making impossible plans succeed, right? It's there to visualize the impossibility of what everybody wants. It empowers you. Okay. So all this is going to look a lot easier for you when I got the Kanban board going and we can working through. But just so you know, if you're particularly interested in this, let's look at it from a QA perspective, because the difference with QA is that QA's got it's very likely that QA will be working with external vendors. It doesn't have a fully hired big team. Okay. So in the case of QA, you've got your external QA. So rather than constraint being numbers of testers, it could be QA lead capacity to define scope and test charters, manage test cycles, triage and prioritize defects, validate fixes, control retest, and produce the go no go view. Right. So that could become the constraint. So external QA can increase testing throughput, but as we all know, if we've ever had to deal with working with external partners, triage sign-off can still bottleneck, and there can be a big increase in the management for the person who's the QA lead, right? So you compute that against the next gate using the QA lead days remaining, triage, coordination, sign-off, not all the test execution. You treat external QA as reducing the work remaining component for execution, but not eliminating lead capacity needs. You have to remember this, I'm about to show it to you. And it's a suggestion for you, right? It doesn't have to be hard and fast rule. It's just, if this works for you, then great. So here's an example, and it shows why the QA lead can be the constraint. So let's assume that the next gate's in 7 working days. Let's just say the remaining test execution is 21 tester days, which is regression new coverage. And there's one QA lead, David, who must coordinate, triage, retest decisions, and provide sign. So what are we going to use here? We're going to say CR. So is the days to the gate divided by the calendar days needed to finish the testing. And the CR for the QA lead is days to the gate divided by the QA lead days remaining. Coordination, triage, sign off. Right. So there's two things there. There's the amount of QA work generally and the QA lead's amount of work. So here's some scenarios then. So what happens if there's no vendor or a small vendor or a big vendor helping? Okay, and so the vendor testers are, you've got one internal tester, the QA lead, and no help, or you've got 1 and 2 help, and you've got 1 and 4 helpers. So the total number of testers. And then what you do is you say, what's the remaining execution effort then? Well, we said it's 21 days. Okay, and how many calendar days are needed? Effort divided by testers. So 21 divided by 1 is 21. 21 divided by 3 is 7. 21 divided by 5 is 4.2. Okay, so the CR on execution, 0.33, 1.0, and 1.67. So the QA lead work remaining, lead days is 4, 5, and 6. What does this mean? Execution is impossible in the case of having no help at all, because the lead is fine. And let me, sorry, I've just realised I've gone a bit fast there, haven't I? So what this means is, look at this one. QA lead's fine at 1.75 because remember it's when it's under 1 that the person's in trouble. But it's here. They can't execute, right? Because they've got 21 calendar days left and can't do it, right? There's no chance. If they have some help, so if they get themselves some help with the 3 testers, then it becomes a lot more possible. So the execution just fits, but the lead is borderline, right, 1.4. Here, where you've got the most amount of help, its execution is actually safe, but right, because it's at 1.67. So 1.0, remember, means they can just about do it. 1.67 means, yeah, I've got loads of time. Brilliant. However, guess what? The QA lead's effort to look after those QA testers and to do the leadership, the triage, the sign-offs becomes the risk because they need 6 days. So that's a 1.17. So that's bordering towards 1. So you can see there that it's all very well having get more help, but the QA person themselves, the lead, can become a constraint. So you can add triage capacity, right, and reduce coordination lead. It's not just about more testers. So practical moves, you can have a fixed triage window. So twice a day, right? Rather than constant interruptions, you can just say, stop interrupting me. These 2 times a day, you can come and hassle me. The rest of the time, define a defect intake policy. So what gets logged now and deferred. That's often what you see, right? I mean, I see that a lot when you get to the scary end of things. You can say, right, here's our policy. Get rid of that one. Don't care about that. Here's a new rule. If it's not this, then don't come bother me with it. We'll defer it. Delegate the first pass triage to a senior dev producer. See that all the time as well. Like QA will go, right, I completely trust the engineering lead to be signing off on a whole bunch of that stuff. Right, don't bother me with it. Just keep me for the critical stuff. And they run the vendor in time box test cycles with clear entry exit criteria to reduce churn. So that's very helpful too, right? So rather than just leaving it to be random, have it time boxed. Keep the whip tight. So fix retest close so the retest doesn't explode. So keep the whip tight means don't let it go crazy, right? Don't let things go mad. Just because you're getting near deadlines doesn't mean to say that the whip gets ignored or you get tempted to move tickets back and forth. Just keep to the rules and it will help you flow, right? It will help you with the chaos. So allocation view, including external QA. If we look at project B, gate in 7 working days, and then we say, well, let's. So this is the list of what people were doing, right? Well, let's look at it again. Let's say, okay, rather than just having the QA lead and what the QA lead's working on, let's chuck in external QA vendor. So this is the small vendor helping test execution. They've got 2 testers helping. They're not working on project A at all. They're 100% on project B. Well, we know now why that is, don't we? We know why they have to be on project B 100% of the time. And we say, okay, great. Adds execution throughput, but increases the trio coordination load on David, who is now over capacity, right? By bringing that help in, he's over capacity. So he's now a constraint. So he needs to get some help. Okay? So if we look at his daily work, though, how does he decide what he's working on? Right? So what does he work on? He knows about the projects, but which are the most important? So what does he do? He looks at his working days to the next gate. He divides it by the remaining QA lead days to hit the gate, as we've said before. Okay. So here, project B, he's got 7 days. A's got 9 days. C's got 16 days. He looks at the remaining QA lead days and he divides that by that. So the remaining QA lead days to gate, his leadership role, he goes, I've got 6 days left of work, but I've got 7 days to the gate. So that's 1.17. 9 to 4 is 2.25. 16 divided by 3 is 5.33. Fixed date standard. So standard is absolutely going to be at the bottom. The 2 fixed dates, right? 1.17 is worse than 2.25. So it's his primary focus. And secondary is time box support only. In other words, if there's ever a situation where he's got some spare time, he can do some time box support. He can go like, I can help you for an hour, but then I'm go back to this. So he looked at it. He went, right, okay. What do I do within B? I know that B is what I'm supposed to be working on. What do I do? What can I do to unblock the gate? The go, no go risks. What's the fast feedback I can give, right? Aging, so I don't want items rotting. Minimise changeover. So it's very similar to what we talked about with anybody else. I've slightly tweaked it, right? And we've assumed that in QA, an aging threshold is 2 working days, right? Not 5 or 10, but 2. And that's important, isn't it? Because for QA, you don't want things resting, sitting there for more than 2 days when you're heading into deadline day, and it could be holding up a bunch of people. In other words, unblock the gate is the thing at the top. Prove the test cycle entry criteria, triage, new PO, P1, retest. Does it block the gate? Yes. Well, guess what? That means it's the top priority. Fast feedback loop? Yep. So not only does it block the gate, but it's a fast feedback loop as well. Aged weighting 0013. Aging, yes. Okay. And then next action and the ranks, right? So we've followed our rules. We've said here, this confirms entry exit start cycle. This is decide fix deferral, assign owners, verify and close the loop, clear the AG items, time box pass. But in terms of the absolute clear highest priorities, follows this unblock gate, pass the feedback, etc. Okay. So David focuses on the project with the lowest QA lead CR. Unless there was an explicit expedite fixed date inside the project, he looks at this unblocking the gate, right? So in entry criteria, POP1 triage, retest gate bugs, time boxing to avoid thrash. So yeah, 2 fixed trial windows per day. Like I said 11 and 4, maybe, right? Whatever. Outside those windows, he focuses on retest sign off work. So he tries to avoid the noise, the thrash around him. How external QA changes it? It reduces the execution risk, but it can increase how much work David has because more defects arrive faster, retest coordination increases, sign off and reporting load rises. So he can do more work because he's got some help, but that work will directly lead to him having more to do. So bear that in mind. And yeah, there you go. So this, I hope, has been helpful. We've covered a lot. What I'm hoping is that different people with different requirements can take different pieces of this and go, oh, that bit's helpful for me. If the entire thing is helpful for you, then make sure you tune in for the next piece, which is me actually designing a Kanban board for you based on what we've said here and showing some of these cards and moving them through and just seeing how the whole thing works together. So I really hope that was useful. My face again. Yeah, I really hope it was useful, and it probably was very overwhelming. I did say in the last one that I was going to try for sessions of half an hour, so I might cut this up. I might see a bit at a time, but there you go. Thank you very much. Please subscribe, please like, please leave comments, please just leave a lot of love. Thank you.